Learn to be super successful. Subscribe to my channel, Meathead.
So, this deal is about a joinery. I have the numbers.
Joinery, you mean carpentry?
Carpentry, exactly. This is a company which has been established about 30 years ago. Two founders. They say they want to sell out of due to age reasons. They're in the low 60s now. Company employs approximately 30 people at the moment. So here I have the revenues of the last 3 years, 21, 22, 23. I put that E here because for 23, obviously, that's the expected revenues. Then underneath, we have the adjusted EBITDA. In 21, approximately 400,000 euros. 22, approximately 644, and we're estimating for 2023 approximately 670,000 euros. So the seller were asking the following price. They averaged the EBITDA of those 3 years, which makes 575K, and added a multiple of 4, which is reasonable for the industry. And they were asking for a purchasing price of 2.3 million euros. So then on that basis, we agreed to go into the due diligence and came out of the due diligence process and made a binding offer to the seller of 1,800,000 euros. $1.8. They were asking 2.3 million. We went into the due diligence process. The multiple on the EBITDA, in that case, approximately 3. 3 EBITDA.
Now, when you're buying, metalworks, small metalworks companies or carpentry companies, etc., it's all dependent on the fact that they've been there a long time. Doesn't really mean anything. What does mean everything is where do the contracts fall? Is 60% of the contracts with one company, or do you have across the board evenly placed 20 companies that represent the business? What you avoid is having too much business with one customer. And I explained to you somebody during the various breaks how people don't look deep enough into the contract source. Where one company that they bought had 5 contracts, but all 5 contracts were controlled by one company. But they didn't look to who owned that one company. And when they changed administrations, they canceled all the contracts. Okay. The other thing is, from an hourly basis, do these carpenters charge by the hour?
Partly, yes.
Yeah. Or do they job in and go say that's going to be 3,000 euros? Or
they have a mixture of services. They're building furniture, but they're also working by the hour for restoring windows in historical buildings, for example.
Now that's a good business.
It's a lot
historical
of
business.
Government contracts.
Correct. Yeah, that's a good business and expensive. And governments don't question too much how much they spend. I'm a victim of that myself because we've had a lot of work done. I haven't had shit done. Sally has had a lot of work done restoring it back to not this building, but restoring the castle back to its former glory. How many repeat contracts do you have? How many contracts have been repeated? Because these small jobs, some of the government stuff isn't such a small job. And so you look at that and you get an average blend and you ask your board, that's supposed to know all this stuff, a lot more than I do, if this is a good thing. And one of the questions I used to, when I was buying oil and gas companies, is I used to ask my very senior boy, would you buy it? With your, they didn't have 401k. Would you buy it with your pension fund? Or your pension money, or the money that you use to supply your income and pension? And if I got a 50% yes, that means it's a good sign, okay? And I got about 50% yes about 50% of the time, because some of the guys weren't interested in, they had more money than they could ever spend. I say Sally has 10 lifetimes of money. So what we put our money into now, and we haven't put our money into any investment vehicle in 20 years, maybe 20 years, because Sally doesn't need investment income. And so that's why we started the foundation. It's such a question.
The seller staying around for a bit?
Yeah, we agreed that he will, or the two sellers, that they will stay on basis of they will stay at least 6 months, maximum 12 months, to accompany the process of handing over the business.
Construction is like all relationships, and they need confidence that you're doing
they were planning on getting out of the business for 2 years, so they have implemented already a manager. So this manager is taking care of, I would say, 70% of the operating business. And still they will stay for at least 6 to 12 months.
We did a deal back in the 80s where we bought a guy's oil and gas service company, but he had a construction company on the side, which was very successful. He built us a log cabin in Vermont, 5,000 square foot log cabin, as extra benefits to, that he could use, but we could use. Not always, but a good portion of the time, the guy's tradesmen, blue-collar workers that, get dirty, are more reasonable to deal with, as opposed to some asshole that came in and bought the book, Your First $100 Million, and there's thousands of you out there. Arguably, there's 10,000 of you. We've sold 1,300,000 books. I mean, there's a lot of you out there, but how many of you in this room have bumped into a QLA guy? 3. Didn't somebody try it? No, not Zane. Somebody. Normally, it's at the board level when you're putting together your boards, but rarely is it at the operational level where you're trying to buy something. And if we've got 1 million people out there, like they tell me, 1 million aren't doing it. Yeah.
There's 2 fairly big roofing companies near my office, and I assume they're QLA because both the owners drive Rolls Royces and they buy a bunch of companies, so they're in their 50s. But I assume they're.
Yeah, well, I mean, I've been training people 30 years, so yeah, it's most likely. And the model works, guys. I mean, there's no question about that. Will the model work for you? That's the question. And that means, are you willing to make the sacrifices and work hard enough? Okay, so what's right or what's wrong with this deal?
Should I give some more detail about the structure then?
Yeah.
So we agreed on the purchasing price of 1.8 million. But before that, we attempted banks already and asked for a commercial loan based on the asking price of 2.3 million. We managed to get a commercial loan of 1.6 million at the end. That was at a fixed interest rate of 5.45% over 8 years. And the bank asked at the beginning for more, but then since the purchasing price went down, we were left with 200,000 of personal equity. The bank
that they want.
The bank wanted 200,000 and gave 1.6 million to come up with a whole purchasing price of 1.8. I brought the 200,000. So we calculated the ratio of free cash flow against the debt service. We have a debt service of approximately 22,000 euros per month. And that brings us a ratio of 1.7.
And this is near Munich?
That is in Berlin.
Berlin. Oh, yes. We always have Berlin.
And then we had that one small detail agreed on within the SPA. So since the deal is going through in December, they have earned approximately, let's say, EBITDA 670,000. So that's free cash after taxes of 400. And we agreed that the sellers will leave the whole profits of the year 2023 within the company. So this is free cash, which can be taken out next year and which can compensate the personal equity. So basically, at the end of the day, there's more or less no personal equity in the deal anymore.
So nobody has to write a check for the equity because they're going to leave.
We had to write the check 200,000
in the beginning
to pay the purchasing price, but then as soon as the ownership goes over, we have access to all the profits of the last financial year.
They left all the working capital.
That was part of the agreement within the SPA.
Well, that's good. That's good. Yes, sir, in the back.
That looks like a nice deal. Does the bank not give a shit whether you take the money out before the loan is repaid, the equity?
We didn't talk about that, if they give a shit or not. I mean, of course, the first thing that happened when we attempted the banks is that they asked, are the sellers willing to do some kind of seller finance structure, which at the beginning we denied because I think they're already only giving less than 3 EBITDA as a loan, which is already less. And we were kind of thinking, if we bring the whole topic of seller finance into the deal, then the bank will give even a smaller loan at the end. So we didn't talk about any seller finance at the beginning.
Does the loan agreement restrict any taking out of money?
No.
Let me stop a second. Like a restrictive covenant or something. Guys, the only time you hear restrictive covenant, or like you got to keep 500,000 in the checking account, no interest bearing, is because they're worried about either the operators or the assets. If you got a thing that, or he's 9 years old, yeah, okay, but when the deal really is like it's supposed to be, and I like free cash flow coverage of 3. John talks about 2, and even 1.8 is all right. That's not all right for me. 3, because every single thing that has ever could go wrong in a deal has gone wrong with me. You've heard me say I've got 3 million pores in my body, and I've been fucked in every one of them at least twice. You name a way to get fucked, I've been there. But that's what your dream team's for. They should have been fucked, if not as many times as I, but the cumulative board should have been fucked a bunch of times. If they haven't, now we had a guy here who was an executive VP of Mercedes. And he had the Mercedes shield and the Mercedes balance sheet behind him all his life. And a lot of these things he never experienced. We had a guy here, a retiring partner from Goldman Sachs. Never experienced a lot of this shit. Because he had the Goldman Sachs shield like Superman. However many billions of they have in equity as a backup. But if you've been in the real normal world where you're gutting it out, fighting it out in the trenches, for, in my case, 50 years, you will have experienced these things. And but when the banks don't ask for those things, it's because they're satisfied that even though they may say there's minimal risk, when a bank says there's minimal risk, that means there's no risk. Minimal equals no. And they won't ask for a lot of the things that the banks are asking. But on the other side, even when I was young, and I did look young at one time in my life, I mean, I would, you have a fiduciary responsibility to the shareholders. I mean, this is the greatest thing since fucking sliced bread. Mother, apple pie, and creation itself. I used to talk like that. And I mean, they used to think I was crazy. And then I go to the next bank. This is the greatest thing since motherhood. Of course, I'm not hot on motherhood anymore, so it's hard for me to say that with a straight face. But I mean, but you've got to act with bravado. Not like a mealy-mouthed mouse. Yeah, but it does look good. And the fact that they haven't asked for that, somewhere, something in this deal, it's either the sellers or you're not a kid. To me, you're a kid. But you're not a kid, works. But then again, we've had kids like Josh that have done it. I mean,
I think a good thing about that whole situation was the numbers were good enough for the banks, because we attended, I would say, 6 or 7 banks and said, these are approximately the numbers. Are you interested? And every single bank was interested. Everybody said, yeah, send me more details.
yeah.
And because, what's the multiple on the EBITDA? What are the numbers of the company of the last 3-4 years? They're very, very reliable numbers. Good margins, 12, 14, 15% is good for the industry. And all the banks were interested.
It only takes one bank to do it, though. And just because another thing that's come up during the corona, because they're doing presentations with Zoom, etc., is the kids are accepting the first bank offer they get. You see 3 banks and 2 of the banks, and then you say yes. You see 20 banks. Because if the first bank says yes, or with slight modification, that means the deal is better than you think. It's better than you think. Now, I always acted like it was better than, but I mean, mostly with bullshit and bravado. I never lied. I never signed a document that wasn't false, I should say. But I didn't press them for the last penny on a deal, which my training at Onassis taught me. You grind out the last, penny. But I squeezed them down, knowing that I could almost absolutely be able to service that debt or perform. But I still went to other banks just to see if I could do much better. But I didn't switch to the other bank 5 or 6 unless there was not a marginal difference, but a great difference. And occasionally, the more you ask, the more you get. But banking, even though you may, I know you think I'm full of shit, but for those of you that saw the Cubans webinar from a year and a half ago, and we just had dinner with them in Florida, and since that webinar, they've tripled their business. So if you're watching Goombas, and I laughingly said, well, you ought to be buying a plane. Their wives both looked at each other and looked at Sally, and then they looked at me. Of course they're buying a plane. You got to find some way to fucking shit the money. I mean, you got to. And of course, the excuse, not you, but 13 or him. Oh, we got assets in Arizona. We got assets in Houston. We got assets in Omaha. Of course you do. You'll be going international. Oh, yeah, well, we're looking at. I've been down this motherfucking road. I wrote the bullshit book. Another book I may write in my retirement is QLA for Bullshit Artists. Because nobody's easier to bullshit than yourself. Now, this is the first deal that makes sense. Other than, The playboy over here. Do you see the difference? No, but boss, if it happens and if there's 29 days in February, my deal works. There's only 29 days in February. How many times a year? Every 3 years, 5 years, whatever it is. But on the 29th, my deal works. Anything else? Sounds good. Wunderbar. Okay, who's next? Okay.
It's a business that the owner, who's now 55, bought 5 years ago as a small business, and then he built it up slightly, and then he wanted to sell it. It was a cold email approach. There were several other people that he was dealing with, so it wasn't an exclusive deal. And I think that's why what happened. The terms on the deal until it fell apart looked pretty good. It was a growing business. There was government contracts with local authorities, with NHS. There was some private clients. Very high margin, motivated team. So the adjusted EBITDA we came up with, there was some add-backs, was 525,000 on a 1.4 million turnover. So that was a 35% EBITDA margin. And the price we agreed was 2.86 times multiple. We pitched 60-40 without interest. He wanted 63%, 37%, and 8% interest, which still sounded good. So he submitted like a counteroffer. What happened then is after a few meetings and speaking to his professionals, who he brought into the picture, so he was well represented. He had his own finance person. He had his own lawyer. When we drafted the LOI, he insisted he drafts the LOI, and he sent his heads of terms. And apart from this, there were several things that we couldn't accept. One of them was he wanted us to personally guarantee the 3 years balloon payment, which we weren't comfortable with. He wanted to also have like an anti-embarrassment clause. If we sell the business within 3 years, we'd have to pay him a fee. And then if the deal didn't go through, he wanted to have a breakup fee, so we would cover his expenses if we didn't close for whatever reason. And then also if the EBITDA went up, as it was a growing business, he wanted to have an uplift on everything that would go from there until we close.
And this guy's 55, and what did he do before in his other life?
I don't know. The initial conversation was actually with David, whom you've seen. So I haven't met him initially, but he bought this business 4 years ago when it was doing like 200K, and he built it up. So, and I think
What's this guy's name?
Jewish guy.
How do you spell the last name? I trained him.
Did you?
Because sellers don't come up with this shit. Believe me. And there are guys out there flipping it 3 to 5 years. Now, I may be getting him confused with another guy, but this is ex-JP Morgan guy.
He enjoyed the negotiation.
I bet, yeah.
It was a game for him. He played well.
And when you want to break a fee and you want to this fee, that's not the normal run-of-the-mill seller. And what was his bullshit why he wanted to sell?
He said he wanted to retire.
He's been retired since he's 30, but anyway. Okay, continue.
The interesting thing I've noticed, and that was across the many businesses we've looked at, what stood out is normally the registered managers in these businesses in the UK make maybe 40, 35, 50,000 pounds a year tops. His one made 90,000 a year. Half of that was commission. So his registered manager was on like a 40,000 base, but made another 50,000 in commission, and she was rewarded of closing the packages from the NHS or the healthcare system, whatever, or upselling the existing clients. So the entire business was very hungry and very well aligned with making money, as was the owner.
So when he asked for those things and you said no.
And then he said, well, thank you. Maybe our path will cross in the future. I'll just run it for another 2 years.
I'm sure it's still for sale, but
Well, once he gets what he wants, he'll sell it.
yeah, but I mean, it'll be big amounts of money and fools are easily separated. He'll find somebody. My recollection is he owns more than one of these. What? Well, he's gonna. How much money will he have made if you agree to his terms? He bought it for what? You don't know what he bought it for.
Well, I think tens of thousands.
Nothing.
I don't think 100 grand.
Yeah.
He would make over $1 million, 1.5 million.
Yeah. And if he's got 10 of them, which if it's the same guy, it sounds like him. He'll make $1 million, $1.5 million on each deal.
Based in Chesterfield, I think.
What?
Chesterfield.
Chesterfield.
So that's about an hour away from Manchester, towards Leeds.
So he lives in Chesterfield.
That's where the business is.
That's
based.
the business,
Yes.
okay. I don't know where, but there's 5 or 6 or 7 guys in the UK that are buying these, running for 2 or 3 years, or they train. One of the guys, I don't think it's him. One of the guys is taking new accountants out of accounting school, and right now, rather than go through an accounting program, he has a small chartered accountant firm where he can register them and make them chartered accountants after 2 years, and he gives them portfolios of these to run. Yeah.
Who we also came across was the Maltesian guy from Leicester. The guy with the stall from the beach.
Oh, the stall.
Yeah. We came across him on a deal that he was trying to close for a while, but the seller was a bit undecided. She was selling in a minute and she wasn't selling because she was making good money. And she then started speaking to us, and based on what we've heard and the nationality and that he's doing this roll-up, we figured it's him. But I think he has two deals only. I think he hasn't made that many yet.
Well, him selling his deals in his hut on the beach for £6, he's made a quantum leap. And his brother runs the beach business now. I want somebody to run across the pole dancer. Pole dancer. What a sweetheart. What a sweetheart. But they're out there. But the point I'm making isn't that they're out there. The point I'm making is so few of you have bumped into them because there's a gazillion deals. So in 30 years, assuming I pump out between 200 and 300 a year from here, a year. I mean, so let's say 300 times 30 years is about 1,000 trained out in the real world. 1,000. Not counting the one day I did, and not counting all the 1 days I've done in previous years. The guys that got the real secret sauce, that came here. It's about 1,000. And rarely, normally you heard, for those of you that heard the Belgian Waffles say that some guy tried to steal his chairman. And since then, you haven't heard, but the Belgian Waffles brother, who he sent through, it doesn't want to do this. He says, it's too much work. Or some excuse, some bullshit. And then I told you Simon, the Nazi, who sent his brothers and sisters and everybody and their dog. But it's a lot of work, so, I mean, it's just, but then, I mean, there's no other place that I'm aware of that you're going to make that kind of money at the exit. You're just not. Unless you hit the lottery, unless you bought Bitfuck at 10,000 and sell it at 35,000, whatever it is. You're going to have another ride for Bitcoin. But it's ultimately going to the same place as I told you from the beginning. Going to suck in a new universe of dipshits. But this is still the only game in town you can make 40 or 50 or 100 million and put up no money. And if you put up money, shame on you. Shame on you. And where you don't have to put, Scotch tape and masking tape and like most of your deals, just straight up fucking deal. You can make hundreds of millions without putting up a fucking dime. With no Scotch tape and no this and no that.
What's a Scotch tape?
Scotch tape is glue, where you glue the deals together. Okay. He'll find it difficult. He will find people that this guy will be able to sell to. They're out there. Because we're back to the stage that we have too much cash chasing too few deals, which bids up the price. The prices across the board, all industries, except the death roll. It's the only one I know that hasn't been bid up. There's a stigma. There's also a stench and a stink. For those of you that haven't lived in the morgue, 15, 20 hours, and that's when they're preparing the people, 15, 20 hours a day. And of course, there's an extra benefit, which I knew about, which Amber, God love you. I told you so, sweet pea. I told you. It's disgusting. Not to everybody. Remember, the female body keeps its temperature, 85% of its temperature for 72 hours. God moves in mysterious ways. So what have you learned? Other than you're going to go back to be a shit disturber in the Czech Republic.
Well, I've learned that the same kind of approach that he has in terms of dictating terms, that needs to be me, not the fucking seller.
Exactly.
And also that this, under normal, acceptable terms, is the type of business I need to start at. I cannot buy anything smaller than this, or it's a piece of shit. Which is what we bought. We bought 2 pieces of shit. And
where are they now?
Where?
Yeah, I mean, what have you done with them?
Well, one is like coasting. One is just surviving, barely. The existing manager, the former owner, stayed with a 40% share, and she's now managing it. Second one we bought, we might lose the local authority contract after purchase because we fucked up the due diligence. So now it's alive, but the business might shut within a month or 2.
$13 and I are laughing. Not at you. You have no idea what can go wrong in a transaction. Of course, my favorite is when Colombia invades Brazil. They've been fighting over the boundary line for almost 400 years. And the week after we we buy the motherfucking mineral rights. It was like a Che Guevara movie. I wasn't down there, and then all the men stayed. That's what I think is the moral to that story. For those, and this mainly for American women. There's a lot of places in the world, sweet peas, that you're watching this, that treat guys a lot fucking better than in America. As stupid as American men are, myself included, although I'm a transplant to Britain, there are places that they factor in that stupidity with love and tender loving care. Boy, that was an eye-opener for me when none of those fucking guys came back. Jesus Christ. And that's why a lot of guys after the Vietnam War, where did they retire to? The Philippines, China, South America, where their dollar went farther, and the gals, rightly or wrongly, appreciated it more. Any other questions for him other than, and partnerships are not easy.
Yeah, that's maybe another thing I've learned. Don't go into business with partners, definitely not friends, and definitely not with your best friends, because it's everything you're trying to implement and everything you're trying to get rid of is still there with you, and you're constantly pushed into the default, and it's hard enough to keep the standard up for yourself, but then when there is another person that doesn't have the standard that high, it's just set up for failure. So I need to get out of this partnership and I just need to do it alone. Again.
EJ, turn off the air conditioner. There's not, their teeth are going to start chattering. Cunts. Okay, yes, sir. 13.
Yes, how could he achieve 300,000 or 30% more in revenue in 1 year with more APR percentage? In 2022, you have 30% more in revenue, right? 1.2 million.
Yes.
And normally, when you have more revenue, you have more stuff.
Why the EBITDA went down?
Yeah, how he managed to get 30% more revenue?
How he grew. So he got new contracts. He had somebody from the NHS, from the health services that he took into the team, and this person was helping him get off-market clients directly. That's what he did.
Yeah, I mean, and if that person either leaves or whatever, or an administration, one of our guys, actually the former, not the last president of the NHS, but the one before him, who lives in Manchester, one of our kids in London made him chairman. So he's rolling up. And the way that they're expanding is as quickly as they have is to contract with the NHS, and the NHS is the government. But every hospital, when the Simon Voss, he goes, he hires people directly from the big NHS hospitals when they're leaving, after 20 years or 25 years. So they have contacts, and the big hospitals are shedding out 150 to 250 people a week that need home health or whatever. And those are the people he's hiring currently. And he's paying cash. And of course the accountants go crazy because he's pulling cash out. He's not taking withholding and all the horse shit. Fine, when I'm a billionaire, I'll worry about it, the taxes. So he's just going forward. And he's the closest to my personality. And everybody thinks he's an asshole. When his sister sat right there, 17 years old, cute as a bug in a rug. Is your brother like this to everybody? Well, he was on his best behavior around you, Mr. Peña. And then I asked his two brothers that came with their two girlfriends, fiancés, oh yeah, around you, he only pushes the envelope so far. And then his next brother, he says, yeah, well, because he knows that you'll strike back. You won't take the bullshit. But everybody else does take the bullshit. And he's like a little Hitler. And his last webinar, the more I am like Hitler, the more they lick my ass. I'm not telling you to be Hitler, and exterminate people. Tonight you're seeing, alpha, male tonight. Okay. You've got to exhibit some alpha tendencies or characteristics. I don't know the right word. But it's certainly not turn the other motherfucking cheek. That's for sure, it's not that. And once you get used to it, now I've been like this all my life. They tell me it's very liberating, very liberating. Cathartic. But I've never been anything other than. The only difference is in the last 20, 30 years, it's more acceptable based, one, on my success. Two, they give more slack to old people. He's eccentric or whatever those horseshit words are. But I've been like this forever. I was reading, as part of the documentary that is being done, how long have you been ostensibly a rock star? I'm not a rock star. But when did people start to give you accolades about doing stuff? So I went back to my archives of data. I have a lot of data on me. And I went back to a letter that was written in April 1968. And a lieutenant colonel named Lindgren, old guy, lifetime Army guy, Army brat. His grandfather was an Army brat. And they were attempting to keep me in the Army. Because I decided, but this letter was written in April 68, and the letter read like, fuck. I was doing all kinds of shit, disobeying orders, but accomplishing the mission. So in April of 1968, how old was I? No. I was born in 45, 55, 65. So I was 23. I was 23. I was always, and if I had gone to Vietnam, I'm sure I would have been killed because I would have been too aggressive. But I was always I've forgotten how many times I disobeyed orders. And if I had failed, court-martial, I'm out. But I didn't fail. When we got out of OCS, bachelor's officers' quarters, BOQs, were for single officers. You couldn't live off post because we would rape, pillage, and God knows we do to the public. But I went to the commanding officer of the base, 2-star general, and three other guys that I didn't really truly represent, but I kind of, represented like you, kind of bullshit, full of shit. And I went to him and I said that we don't want to live on post. In fact, I will not live on post. Now, a second lieutenant, brand new, does not tell a 2-star general that. What did you say? And so, to make a long story short, I got permission with 3 other officers to move off post, to rape, pillage, and plunder. I came up with all these horseshit reasons, just like you. It's against the Constitution. It's against humanity. It's against my sperm count. I'm a better salesman than anybody that's ever come through this fucking thing. By God, Pina, okay, I give you permission. So I come back out, and these 3 other guys are there. But I use their names. We're moving off post, boys, and we're going to rock and fucking roll. We're going to fuck everything that walks. And how'd you do it? I said, not sure. But she could have been thrown out of the Army right then. I've been like this all my life. I don't know any different. I have always thought my shit doesn't stink. And I couldn't spell self-esteem then. I didn't know what it was. I barely understood self-confidence. I didn't know it was going to bode me well to, teach at least a million of you meatheads to get rich. And that's why I've already shown my shock, my surprise, that it's so hard for you to get. The joiner and, LeBron Drain Jr. over here, they have got it. 13 kind of got it. He understands the numbers, and you do understand the numbers very well. I compliment you. It's not always the results they want to hear, but I mean, he understands the numbers. But he should have been, I already told you this, he could have been, with 13 or 14 deals, he ought to be already worth 10, 15 million to your account, meaning about 20 or 25 million to the 100% already. Of course, he intellectually understands that. That's what irritates him. But it's a numbers game. But you got to read the numbers how they really are, what they really portray, not what you want them to portray in the future. Wishing numbers in the future is no better than performer numbers. And that's what Vivian, our lawyer, is good at. I was going to say little bitch, but she may watch this. But the little girl. By the way, she wishes you best. Yeah. Okay, but you had to learn this shit the hard way, unfortunately. Yeah, and I told you in the beginning, you're still young, okay, but that's no excuse to, you don't have to step on your dick, but now he's got some not so tough decisions in my mind, but he's got some decisions to make, whether it's going to be back in behind the Iron Curtain or someplace else other than Manchester, other than Manchester United, Manchester City that everybody brags about, the two football teams. There's other than football, there's not much there.
I think a big fuck up on my part was the visa residence issue.
Yep.
Until this day, I don't have any long-term permit to be there. So everything I get to do there is very expensive. I have to stay in an Airbnb. I cannot get a proper rent. I need to leave once in a while. A car that I bring there, I need to bring back in a 6 months' time. It's like a lot of logistics around it. Hence, even the finance and a lot of stuff that I would take for granted in a different country, EU, for example, very hard to access. And I think that was me not doing my homework and just either not doing a big enough deal fast enough or not doing my homework and just going into it too blindly.
Both. Okay, thank you.